automotive industry is changing how we get from one place to another, from gas-powered vehicles to EV electric vehicles and autonomous driving cars as well. A lot of important conversations had, and a conversation you're going to want to watch and be here for. Michigan Chronicle Pancakes and Politics.
Good morning and welcome to Season 17, Forum 3 of the Michigan Chronicle Pancakes and Politics. We want to welcome you this morning and thank you all for coming out for a conversation with Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors. And all I can say is girl power. And I'm so anxious to hear from her this morning, as I'm sure you are. At this time, I'd like to welcome to the stage the CEO of Real Times Media, publisher of the Michigan Chronicle, Hiram E. Jackson.
Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? It's a nice spring day. Great start. I'm really excited about this morning. This is actually Mary's second time with Pancakes and Politics. At the height of COVID-19, in the midst of the George Floyd protests, we actually had an opportunity to do an interview with Ms. Barra. She came over to our office at the Michigan Chronicle, and it was a great discussion. Did anybody see it here? It was online at the MichiganChronicle.com. And after that interview, Terry Radican, I see you, raise your hand, Terry. Terry called me and said, hey, we got to find a way to be involved with Pancakes and Politics. This is awesome. And I said, hey, we sold out. I can't help you. And he said, well, man, think about it. Let's get creative. And we did. And they're our broadcast sponsor. And we've done a heck of a job with that, haven't we, Terry? We appreciate you. I appreciate you and General Motors. I want to thank our platinum sponsors, Delta Dental, DTE, Signal Restoration, Walker Miller Energy Services, and especially our presenting sponsor. PNC has been with us for a while now, and they're a great partner. Next month, June, will be our last live Pancakes and Politics for the year. I think it's going to be very special. I wish I could tell you right now. I really want to tell you right now, but I can't. But we're finalizing it, and I think you all will really enjoy it. And last month, if you remember, Bob Riney, CEO of Henry Ford Health, couldn't be with us, but we were able to get him into our studio, and we have a Pancakes and Politics Overdrive coming to you soon. It's a great conversation with he and Dennis Archer Jr. I want to thank business leaders for Michigan for allowing us to broadcast these overdrives as well. And I'm going to be brief. I'm going to bring on my good friend, Dennis Archer Jr., the chairman of 1642 Ventures, to introduce our presenting sponsor and the chair and CEO of General Motors, Mary Barra. Thank you, and enjoy the conversation.
That was brief for Hiram. I don't know if that was brief. Good morning, everyone. I want to just cut to the chase this morning because there's so much material. There's so many topics that we can talk with Mary about, so I'm going to skip my normal banter. But I am going to invite up Michael Bickers, who's the market leader for PNC. PNC has been a phenomenal partner to the Chronicle, to Real Times Media, to Pancakes and Politics. And Michael has just been a phenomenal addition since he's come back to Michigan for a second tour of duty. So Michael, a couple words, please.
I think we all want to hear from Ms. Barra this morning, and so to maximize her time, I would just real quick, this is, I don't know how many folks really understand or think about where Michigan is when there's normally talk of recession and all of these financial issues that we have, and I guess the economists are going to talk us into one way or another. Sooner or later you'll have one, they'll say, I told you so. But I can tell you that, and I hope Ms. Barra doesn't mind me saying this, I'm an automotive nut, for those who don't know. So I listen to every single General Motors earnings conference call and the other guys as well. And it's a thrill to hear her talk about strategy and the performance of the company, because it means strength for Southeast Michigan and Michigan on a broader level. But in the early 90s, 91 or 92, it's such a contrast, because I can remember a GM conference or press conference where they announced the closing of 21 plants and the layoff of 74,000 people. And today, with all that's going on, all we hear about is the multi-billion-dollar investments that General Motors continues to commit to Michigan and all over this country, and so it's a much different place to be. So I'm thrilled to hear from her, and PNC is honored to be the presenting sponsor today in particular. So thank you.
I think when you've often seen people give introductions and bring people to the stage, and people often say there's no need to give any background or bio because you're very aware of who the person is and what they are about. This is one of those instances. So Mary, come on up. So good morning.
Good morning.
It's interesting. So before we delve into serious questions, this morning, I believe in theme music. So this morning was Run DMC's first album from 1984. I was blasting it.
All right.
And I turned it down when I pulled into the parking lot here. But so then I was thinking, when Mary goes into a earnings call or before a board meeting or a big presentation, what does Mary listen to?
Well, for any of those events, I'm listening to CNBC because I want to make sure I know what's happening the moment before I start the meeting. But on the way home.
On the way home.
On the way home. You know, my son got me hooked on country music.
Oh, nice.
And then my daughter, and I'm a Swiftie. So I don't know if any of you know what that means. So Taylor Swift, she's a lot of Taylor Swift, so I'm very influenced by my children's music. They actually make Spotify playlists for me.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
So you talk about your children. I happen to know Rachel, and you've done an amazing job with work-life balance. There's a lot of very driven people here, but women in particular, who are moms, CEOs, leaders. Any advice for aspiring female leaders in particular as it relates to maintaining work-life balance? Because from the outside, it seems like you're doing a pretty good job.
Well, there's ups and downs in it. And my advice to everyone is if you account for it on a daily basis, you're just going to not feel great about yourself. But when you look at it over a month or two and you're out of balance, then you need to make a course correction. Because there's times, the business will demand all of your time for a day, but there's also a time that your kids will demand time. And you've got to be able to make that balance. And I would also say as the kids get older, everybody says it's not quantity of time, it's quality of time. Once you have teenagers, you never know when the quality is going to happen. So focus on the quantity. You can ride for 2 hours in a car and you may get a really good 5 minutes of conversation.
So we'll talk a little later about range anxiety and EVs. But in preparing for this morning's discussion, I hearkened back to when my family used to drive every year out to Martha's Vineyard. And part of that trip was going down to the AAA office and getting the trip map. Yes. Some of y'all don't remember that, but you get the, all right. All y'all are telling your age, everybody clapping. So for those that don't know, you would go get a trip map, and then the person behind the counter would highlight, and they keep flipping the page up, and they would highlight it. And now we have Waze and Google Maps, etc. But let me map out kind of where I want to go today. I had to do this so I'm ADD, so I can stay on point. A little bit on the fiscal health of the business. Because we are who we are here, we've got to talk about race and equity and inclusion. And we must talk with you about EV because you're really leading the way with General Motors. Michael talked about the earnings call, and Michael, I don't know where you went, but if you got time to listen to everybody's earnings call, you need more to do. But I do know, though, that you adjusted your forward-looking EBIT, I think, up by $500 million for end of the year earnings for between 11 and 13 billion. And that's really remarkable given bankruptcy was not that long ago. We're just coming out of COVID, and you're putting billions of dollars into EV, which may not really monetize and contribute to earnings significantly for years to come. So how are you managing this fiscal strength and success?
Well, we really, having been in this business for more than 40 years, it's a really interesting time because we're now just starting to transition into a more normal environment. For the last 2 years, we've been supply constrained, and so the demand has been great. And so when you think about 2+ years of the consumer not being able to necessarily just go to a car dealer and buy a vehicle, we're just now starting to moderate. So we still are seeing very strong demand, strong pricing power. I think from a GM perspective, we have the best portfolio of vehicles that we've had in my career. Not only our internal combustion engine vehicles, but also our EVs. So, and by the end of the year, we'll have 9 EVs in the marketplace in the United States. So I'm really excited about that. But also, we are just continually working on efficiency. How do we continually improve every part of the business? We did this year embark on a $2 billion structural cost reduction. In doing that when we're healthy and we're seeing strong demand, because we know that the industry is a cyclical business. And this is a unique time. I think everybody's trying to understand, is there a recession? Are we in one? Is one coming? Is it going to be moderate? So we need to prepare for that. But really, what's driving our financials is the strength of our products and consumer demand that we're very excited about.
That's wonderful. You often hear the saying, when a GM catches a cold, Detroit and Michigan catches the flu. So we are all very happy that you're fiscally well. Talk about your ongoing commitment to the city of Detroit and your investments here.
Well, I think over the last few years, we've invested over $200 million. We recently announced that by 2024, we would be investing $50 million, I should say $200 million, and then $50 million to really support people to develop the city, education, and really to help people thrive. And we're $30 million into that commitment that we've committed to be to the 50 by the end of next year. So I'm really proud of the work that we do in the city. The fact that we have one of our most important factories, Factory Zero, in Detroit-Hamtramck. And I think in that, the business that it brings. Detroit is our home. It's our headquarters. It will always be our home, and we're very proud. I would say the other big initiative that General Motors has is education. And we're members of Detroit Children's Fund. In fact, their fundraising event is this weekend. But really, I think it's incredible when you look at the city of what's happened from the development and the businesses that are here, the nightlife, the restaurants, art. But in order to keep people here over the long term, we need to make sure the educational system is strong. And so the work that's going on and really companies coming together under Detroit Children's Fund to really make sure we have quality educational seats. I know you're on Jalen Rose Academy's board. I think that's a huge focus for General Motors.
You following George Floyd, I think it was in June of that year, were very brave in the first instance to stand up with Reverend Anthony, who I don't see him here yet, but he's prone to come in late, so he may be still on his way. But, and several of your peers to make certain commitments following that incident. But you solely went out also and made very public statements on behalf of your company, which a lot of people, a lot of leaders would not have been as courageous because they would have been worried about the pushback they may get from some segments of their workforce, from some segments of the consumer community. But notwithstanding all that, you did what you thought was right. How has that played out, and what kind of went into your mindset when you made that decision to do that?
It was just a frustration on behalf of the entire GM leadership team of, a tragedy would occur, someone would lose their life, everybody would be appalled, upset, and then nothing would happen. And then the next sad situation, and then the next. And so, for us, it was just kind of like, we just can't keep accepting this. And so, that's why we made the statement that we wanted to work to be the most inclusive company in the world, but not something we wanted to be by ourselves. We want every company to be inclusive, because then that contributes greatly to this country and, frankly, the world being inclusive. And for me personally, it's been a journey of learning of what does inclusion mean, what does equity mean, how do we really create that in the workforce? And for me, what it comes down to, every day, all of us, no matter whether we're at an event like this, whether we're in the workplace, whether we're at our children's school, how do we make other people feel? Because, I've been at General Motors for a long time. There's times at GM where I haven't felt valued or included in my 40 years. And I think if I asked everyone in this room in their career has had a moment in time, hopefully not many, where you didn't feel included, you didn't feel valued. And that feels horrible. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about it at General Motors, we talk about every day, how do we make sure that when we interface, it's not just what I do, but it's what all of us collectively do. Do we make the people around us feel valued? Do we listen? Or do we accept differences? And so we've really been on a journey to help people understand and explore that, as well as doing, I'll say, the things you need to do of, looking at your representation, looking at your hiring, looking at your promotions. And so making sure we have training. We've embarked on a training program across all our facilities to really help people understand bias. And because a lot of people don't, you don't know. And we've also tried to create safe space where, and I tell my team, if I do something, I feel like my intent is good, but if I unintentionally say something because I don't understand how it's received, please tell me, let's have a conversation. So we've done a lot of discussions also in the company. So it's a journey. This is a journey that never is over. But we're just really striving to keep learning and to keep together as General Motors and the entire General Motors team to provide that environment, because I think it's important for the future. I think more diverse companies, you look at things from different points of view. I think you make better business decisions. And also, there is a war on talent, and having the right environment, it's one thing to get people to come to your company, but keeping them, retaining them,
That's right.
and helping them be their best self. So it's something that we focus on quite a bit at General Motors, but again, it's a journey.
It's interesting, staying on this equity and inclusion piece for a second. You will recall that as we are here representing the black media, that Byron Allen, a few years ago, challenged all of the OEMs as relates to media spend, as it related to how black folks were portrayed or not portrayed in their advertising. And I think that you pivoted very well in that regard as well.
Yeah, it was kind of a very out there, and at first I was like, oh my gosh, when Byron made some of his initial statements. But then we stepped back and we listened. And we did a number of sessions with black-owned media companies and people in the community, and we learned we could be better. We learned some of our processes. General Motors is a big company. We have a fairly significant media spend. So just by volume, we weren't really providing an environment where a smaller company could do well. And it's simple things like changing our pay practices, because the cash flow situation is different in a smaller company than a larger company. But it was also making a commitment, and that's what led to the creation of the incubator. Also, and I'm very pleased to say in 2022 we exceeded our goals that we set for the spend with not only black-owned media, but other diverse groups, and it's a journey we continue on. So, as difficult as it was as the way the conversation started, I really feel by listening and partnering, we're a better company for it. And there's Jeff Bezos always has a saying that I thought was very wise. He said, what do what do you do? What's the first thing you do when someone criticizes you? Because I think most of us, we go back and go, wait a minute, that's not right, that's not true. And he's like, I listened, I say to myself, could they be right? And I think this was one of those situations where we could do better, and we had to commit to do it, but before we could, we had to listen and learn, and that's what we did.
It's very good advice, very good advice. We're going to pivot now on our path, our roadmap towards EV, but in the route there, you have a lot of aspiring and present-day black entrepreneurs in the room, some larger, some smaller. I think I saw Leon Richardson, who's one of our suppliers, is in the room this morning. What advice do you have for entrepreneurs in the room who are interested in getting involved in this next iteration of vehicle, the EV generation?
Sure. Hey, before I go there, I have to say, the other thing that we did, and I want to personally thank Dennis, is we created an inclusion advisory board, and Dennis represents our suppliers, as well as we have representation from our dealers and others, and I really want to thank you for your service, because that was, it really, the dialogue from having external points of view coming into the company has been very valuable, so thank you. I think this is a time of great transformation, and when there's transformation, there's opportunity. And from our space, just even all the business around this city of how we're changing and making, components that go into EVs instead of internal combustion engine. And so I think there's opportunity there. We also at GM have a venture fund that we look primarily at technology, but there's opportunities there. And so, but I think as you're starting a company, big or small, is really look to where in the area you're in the business is going and make those investments. I think so often, sometimes we try to cling to the way the business is, and there's transformation going on in every aspect of our business, whether it's with our dealers, the supply base, the components that we need. And so, I challenge yourself for your business to look and say, not just where am I today, but what's coming and what are the opportunities and the threats. But I do think with this type of transformation, there's a lot of opportunity to create new businesses.
Thank you. As we talk about range anxiety and we talk about ensuring from an equity standpoint that there are enough charging stations in dense urban populations, one of the things we do at Pancakes and Politics is we take the conversation to the streets. Okay. And we ask some folks, just regular folk out in the street, their opinion on the topic. And so I think we're going to tee up a video now and hear from people in the streets, and then we'll go into an EV discussion.
From gas stations for fuel-powered cars to charging stations for battery-powered vehicles, the industry is changing. So how do Detroiters feel about it?
I see a lot of them out here, but, I'm old school, going with the gas.
As Mr. Donnell fills up his pickup truck, he's in no rush for an electric vehicle. Meanwhile, Tyra brings her first-hand perspective. She test drives vehicles for a living.
Some of the pumps don't work that you pull up to, and so that's an issue. Sometimes the vehicles run out of energy faster, and you also, like in the winter months, when you have your heat on, it burns more energy in the vehicle. So it's compared to your cell phone. I'm gonna just say that.
For this gas station owner, he's attempted to make space and purchase a charging station for what was available, but eventually decided against the investment.
We were thinking about it, but the time, 2 to 4 hours to charge a battery, that's just a very long time to designate a spot for customers. Like, look, he put in $40, it probably took him 3 minutes. In order, if that was an EV charging station, he would be sitting there for 3 to 4 hours.
And then there's the narrative by some on what they think an electric vehicle will cost.
I already know it's going to be very expensive, so, that's number one. And what we going to do about the ones that can't afford it?
For Donnell, he's a little bit more optimistic.
As far as the environment, I'm all for that, as far as saving on the, pollution in the air and things like that.
So while some drivers are set on powering up for the future, it's still going to take time for some Detroiters to make that change. So while it's good for the environment, you're still going to drive your gas-powered truck?
I'm still going to drive my gas-powered truck. It's reliable.
An automotive industry that's changing, where the future is here now. For Pancakes and Politics, Andre Ash, Michigan Chronicle.
So I don't think there's anything surprising there about some of the realities of how people are thinking, even if maybe in some instances it's misinformed or not informed enough. But these are the perceptions out there. But before we go to just a general EV discussion, let's talk about specific to General Motors, the platform, Ultium. Tell us what is Ultium and what all is it going to support?
Great. So, when we started doing, General Motors actually 20 years ago did EV1, and we were before our time from a technology, but we never stopped working on battery technology. And so in 2010, we came out with the Volt, which was an extended range electric vehicle, and then the Bolt, which I actually was driving until I just switched into a Lyriq, and I love the Bolt and love the Lyriq as well. That was our Gen 2 technology. But with the Bolt, what we realized is if you keep converting an internal combustion engine vehicle to electric, you just face a series of compromises, and you're not going to give the customer what they're really looking for. So in 2018, that's when we started working on Ultium, and we wanted a modular platform that also enabled a whole new design language, because now when you're doing the battery platform, you're not trying to package the batteries within where the engine would go. You're now really purpose-built. And so Ultium takes us all the way from an Equinox-size vehicle all the way to a super truck like the Hummer, commercial vehicles like BrightDrop, the Silverado EV, the Sierra EV. So it's kind of a plug and play where you put as many modules in as you need to power and get the performance that you want of the vehicle. So we started producing vehicles off of Ultium at a very low production rate at the end of 21 with the Hummer. Through 22, it was a very slow ramp. And people always like, why is it so slow, Mary? Because we need battery cells. And our battery cell plant is now fully online in Ohio, in the Lordstown, Ohio area. We have another plant that will come online this year at Spring Hill. And then in Michigan, we'll have another battery plant. And those are our first 3 battery plants, although we've announced a 4th, we haven't announced a location. But the scalability now that we have of Ultium is allowing us to have 9 vehicles by the end of this year, 7 of which will be off the Ultium platform that we will have launched in the last, starting at the end of 21, 22, and 23. So it's allowed us to ramp quickly. And, a lot of people say, well, there's other OEMs in the electric space that only have a couple of vehicles. But if you think about who's buying an electric vehicle right now, for the most part, there are people who are buying it as their 2nd, their 3rd, their 4th vehicle. But General Motors, the heart of our customers, are people who only own 1 vehicle, and they need it every day to go to work. And if it doesn't work, if it can't be fixed, if it's not charged, that's a problem. And so I think we're just at the point now, we'll have a very affordable EV off of Ultium, the Equinox, that'll be in the 30s, coming out a few months from now. And that starts to, I think, make EVs more accessible. What I will tell you is they're really fun to drive. I mean, what is different is instant torque. So they're fun to drive. A lot of our vehicles, also the connectivity that we have in them, we're getting really strong and positive response from that. But what everyone said on the interviews is true. Range anxiety is an issue. And that's why all of our EVs, we think kind of that mindset, and we've done a lot of research on this, of when people start to worry less about range is when we get to over 300 miles. And so that's kind of a baseline. Now, there's some applications where 250 or a little lower is okay, especially in some commercial where it's a fixed route. But for the most part, people need 300 miles. And then from a charging perspective, if you're able to charge in your garage, that's the best. Because I thought it was probably spot on that somebody who was operating a gas station, especially in an urban or even suburban, no one's going to stay at the gas station for as long as it's going to take to charge. Maybe 10 to 15 minutes if it's a supercharger. But in general, I think there's different places we're going to now look to charge our vehicles if we're not charging at home, because we may not have a garage and we may not even have assigned parking. But when companies like Walmart or 7-Eleven say we're going to provide charging, that starts to make more sense, because when you go grocery shopping, unless you're just popping in and out, usually that's at least a 45-minute, for me anyway. It takes me, it's like 45 minutes at a minimum. And that becomes then much more realistic for getting the charge that you need. We also think businesses, it's going to be important for businesses have the ability for people to charge while they're at work. So we're building out the infrastructure. And the other thing, though, we need to make sure is when, the biggest complaint I hear right now, because there's more chargers out there than people think, is when I get to it, is it available and does it actually work? And so there is work to go on infrastructure, but I will tell you, between startups, between what came as the bipartisan infrastructure bill, there's money set aside for charging. That should really go to rural and more suburban areas, and I think that then, we're really focused with states as they started to put their proposals in to really focus on some of the communities that might not be the first location a startup's going to put chargers.
It would seem to me that eventually there needs to be, or should be now, more collaboration as relates to the deployment of the charging stations, because you've got BP, the gas company, is partnered with Hertz to do charging stations for Hertz. You're partnered with EVgo to deploy charging stations, and you can go down. Volkswagen has a partnership with another company to do charging stations. You've got retailers involved in putting charging stations, where I agree it makes the most sense. But in order to get to where we need to be, say by 2035, I think we need 500,000 charging stations totally, and right now we have 50,000. And so is there any collaborative effort going on right now, or do you think that it will happen through the competitive nature of business?
I think it'll be both. I think, we're involved in conversations right now about collaborating with others. The good thing, though, for chargers, if you set aside the Tesla charging network, because they have a proprietary plug, although, frankly, you can go to Best Buy and buy an adapter for, I think, about $150. Every other vehicle in the U.S. is using the standard plug that was designed by the Society of Automotive Engineers. Because imagine when you get, okay, so we need 500,000. Imagine if you've got to go find the one that works with your car. That's crazy. And that's why the industry early on standardized on a protocol. So it'll be like gas stations. We don't have to go to a certain gas station. Everybody's got a common way that they fuel. So I think that's, we're on that path. But I do think we need to work more collaboratively together. I would also say, right now everybody's trying to own the data off of charging. What we're trying to do from a GM perspective is make it really easy. So if you have a Bolt right now, you can have in my Chevy app, we were working, I think, with 9 different charging companies, but they're all able to, just by going to my Chevy, we can map your route and where the charger is, where you should stop. We want to get to a point, for instance, we also did a deal from an interstate perspective with Pilot Flying J. So then you can actually even reserve and get a discount if you have a GM vehicle, because we've made the investment with them to put the chargers in. But I think over time, the ability that you can go to one place and plan your route and know that the charger works, know it's going to be available, and frankly, just pay with a swipe on your phone or in the dash of the vehicle, I think is where we've got to get to get the adoption we need. So I think it's everything coming together, but it starts foundationally with having a common standard for charging, which everyone is evolving to, or like I said, for the network that doesn't comply with that right now, you can buy an adapter.
You talked about the Chevy app, and I use my Cadillac, I have Escalade, I use the app, it's fantastic, but the company has made a recent announcement regarding connectivity for certain phone platforms. And so I think to date, everyone's used to getting in the car and your iPhone connects to the system, but Apple CarPlay and Android Auto will be no more with future production of EV vehicles. Talk about that decision and the why.
Yeah, I don't know, you're probably all going to boo me about this decision if you use Apple CarPlay right now, but I think it's not like, I think so many people just assumed we're taking it away and there's nothing behind it. Because we are getting a lot of feedback from consumers. Right now our system for connectivity is actually built on Google Automotive Services. It's a platform, so it's an Android-based platform, and so and that gives us the opportunity to have Google, to have Waze already. Think of it as an app on the infotainment system. You're still going to be able to have the connectivity, and I don't know how many people, if you can also screencast, so there'll be opportunities there. But the feedback we were starting to get was, I need better integration, and I don't know how many times, when you're in traffic, what do? You look at, if you have an Apple you look at Apple Maps, then you look at Google Maps, and then you look at Waze, and you try to figure out, how do I get where I want to go? Having that more integrated as opposed to jumping through systems, or if whatever phone you have, if you've jumped to a different mapping solution, then is it going to let you have your contacts? There's actually a lot of conflict because, frankly, once you get into the vehicle and you're with Android Auto or your Apple CarPlay, they kind of want to own you, and they don't like it when you leave their environment. What we're trying to do is provide an environment where you choose what map system you want to use. You choose, you want to use Spotify or Apple Music, Sirius, and have it be though seamless and integrated that it works, frankly, better. Because for us to not have that connectivity from the traditional systems you're used to today, what we're moving to has to be better. And that's why we made the decision it won't start until I believe it's the Trailblazer. It's one of our EVs this year because we thought that's when we have a system that's going to be a step above. I think at some point later, a couple years from now, you're going to see and you'll be like, wow, I thought this was the greatest, but look at how much more I can do. Because once we have that interface, then we can start pulling information from the vehicle to, think about if you're told ahead of time that something's going to, is wearing out on your vehicle. So we're working to make the experience better, but this assumption that we're taking it out and there's nothing behind it, I think was a little simplistic, but our goal is to provide you an even better seamless experience and also not force you into one environment. It's going to give you more choice.
Ryan, we're going to take questions from the audience in a second, but how many people in the audience have taken a ride in an autonomous vehicle? Actually, more than I thought. Tell us about, we've got 100.
Can I ask you a question, though? Was that on autopilot, Tesla autopilot? Because that's not autonomous. I mean, it's not an autonomous vehicle. That's a driver assistance technology. True autonomous vehicles are when there's no one in the driver's seat. And for any of you that have ridden, we have a driver assistance technology called Super Cruise. Ford has one called Blue Cruise. Tesla calls theirs Autopilot. Those are driver assistance technology. In any of those systems, you acknowledge you're responsible. What true autonomous is when the vehicle is responsible. So right now, Cruise is giving rides in San Francisco, Austin, Phoenix. We just announced expanding to Dallas and to Houston. But if someone has to sit in the driver's seat, that's not autonomous. It's not level 4 anyway. It's a driver assistance technology. So just, again, there's a lot of confusion. And frankly, if you're not in a level 4, please pay attention because you're responsible.
How many people have been in a level 4 truly autonomous vehicle in the room?
All right.
All right, the number went down a little bit.
Thank you.
Ryan, you have a question from the audience?
I do. Good morning, everybody, and good morning, Mary. This is the first time I've had an opportunity to speak with you, and I really appreciate this chance to have a one-on-one. I have a very interesting question that I got from an audience member, and if any of you have any questions for Mary that you would like for me to read, we have cards at the table. Take a pen, write it down. We'll have somebody come around to get those cards. Just wanted to know, obviously, your commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion is so very important. So this question is, who is the ranking African-American person at General Motors, if you can talk about that?
I think today we have a senior leadership team of about 15 people, and Gerald Johnson is our global executive vice president for global manufacturing and sustainability. And so Gerald would be the highest ranking person.
Awesome. And
I thought that was they were going to get you on that one, see? You were ready. All right.
I do have one question for you, Mary. So I think many of us saw what happened with Rivian and how they had a stock price loss. Last week they lost 10% of their stock value because their production slowed. And so from that perspective, obviously you've invested a lot in Ultium. And although the Chevy Bolt is not going to be in production, What is General Motors doing to avoid the fate of what Ford Motor Company is going with Rivian with respect to EV production and not having any sort of revenue loss in that regard?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think right now most autos are undervalued from a stock perspective. Even, I'll say OEMs that have been in, that sell millions of vehicles, not startups, because they're deemed as a cyclical business. And right now, with this constant talk of, are we moments away from a recession? Are we in a recession? Is there going to be a recession? And frankly, the debt ceiling conversation isn't helping anybody's stock right now. So I think most companies are undervalued. I think when you look at some of the startups, if they don't, the type of growth and why frankly, I think their stock went too high when people looked at it originally. I mean, I think at one point Rivian was a $100 million market cap, and I think it's, I think in the teens right now. But I think that was kind of overhyped. But I think as you make this transformation, first of all, manufacturing's hard. And getting the supply base. We still are seeing shortages in the supply base. In certain places, people are still struggling to have enough people to do the work every day. And so there's still a lot of bumpiness in the auto industry supply chain. We're still impacted by semiconductors, although much less. But again, we can have a supplier who is struggling. They don't have workforce. There was tornadoes a couple months ago in the middle of the country that impacted. So, it's kind of because the supply chain has been stretched so thin ever since COVID, and we really haven't had a chance to build it back up again because it's still struggling in many cases. That's what causes those bumps. So I think everyone's having them. I think it just becomes more acute when you're trying to launch, and you've only got one vehicle as opposed to some of the bigger OEMs that were running several plants.
Leon wanted to ask you, Mary, a question here, if we can get that from him.
Leon, don't ask for a purchase order. This is not the appropriate.
You know I was going to start with.
All right.
We can always use an additional purchase order, so if you can help us. Mary, General Motors has led the band when it comes to diverse suppliers. I mean, you guys are the leaders in the market. You always have been. I'm a living testament of that. But as you transition from internal combustion engines to electrification and digitalization, how do you see diverse suppliers participating in that? Because I know you're committed to it, but this is a major transformation. How do you see that happening and taking place?
We have to be intentional. And it's something that our purchasing team, first of all, the feedback we get from our supplier councils, but as we look, it's something that General Motors has been very intentional about, that has led for us partnering with a supply base, collectively using our resources together to grow the capability. So as we make this transition and need new parts source, we will be very intentional about it. And it's something, that Jeff Morrison, who's our head of global purchasing and supply chain, he's evaluated on. It's part of, I think when you want behavior, you have to measure for it and be very intentional, and we will continue to be.
We have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Just want to stay on this EV conversation because obviously we understand here in Michigan, and Michiganders understand that electrification is so very important. I think the gentleman in the piece that we saw said that he's still using his gas-powered vehicles, and people in the rest of the country and the rest of the world, they're still trying to catch on to electric concept. So I have an interesting question. Is the infrastructure of EV prevented by the economics of installation or just willingness to do it?
I think there's several issues. Right now, batteries are still more expensive than internal combustion engines, and I think that's why the IRA bill was put in place to incentivize people to bring manufacturing to this country and for us to get supply chain resiliency. But I think we still got to get costs down, and we've got to get more reliability in the charging network like we talked about. But if you think about this, is a transformation that's going to happen over decades. The U.S. car park is 250 million vehicles. They just measured last week, and it used to be the average age of a vehicle was between 11 and 12 years. It's now 12 and a half. It's approaching 12 and a half. So, and when you think about, and we sell this year, will be somewhere, probably north of 15 million new vehicles. This is for the industry, will be sold. This transformation is going to happen over decades. We did, the most significant transformation before this is when people moved from horse and buggy to internal combustion vehicles. That took 50 years. Now, I think this will be a shorter transformation. I think it will be regulatory driven, so it won't have that long a tail. But I think this next 10 years is going to be critical. General Motors is the only full-line manufacturer who has made the commitment that by 2035, all of our light-duty vehicles will be electric. But again, so that's 12 years away with, and that'll be just the vehicles we sell that year. Now, we want to ramp up between now and then. There'll be a regulatory environment that drives it. But this transformation is going to happen over a period of time that allows us to keep improving battery chemistry so we get the cost down. It allows the charging infrastructure to become more built out, more reliable, faster ways of charging. The reason we can't charge as fast as people would want is because if you charge too fast, you can actually damage the battery. And on the most expensive component in the vehicle, you don't want to shorten its life. So there's a lot of, I think, innovation that will happen that will enable it. But this is something that's going to happen over the next couple decades.
You mentioned 2035, and we'll come back, Ryan. And I know California has taken a hard line, and they said that by 2035, all cars sold in that state must be electric. And I know a number of states are considering signing up for that. How important is that in order to help you achieve your goals and have that be a successful strategy?
I think it's directionally correct, but I think, what we want to do and what General Motors has always tried to do is, as opposed to, the regulation forcing you to do something, let's have great vehicles in the infrastructure, and that's why we've invested $750 million to try to stimulate the development of the charging network, because we'd rather customers choose to move to electric because it's better, as opposed to, us trying to, convince you to do it. Which is just, when the regulatory environment gets out of the consumer, what consumer demand is, that mismatch makes it very difficult for the car companies to kind of meet the regulatory environment. So that's why General Motors we're working as fast as we can to create vehicles and to make sure there's a robust charging network that you want an electric vehicle. So, when states say they're going to mandate it, I think it's directionally correct, but I think we've got to make sure that we don't leave anyone behind in that journey. Because if all new car sales have to be that and people can't, it's going to push people to the used car market. I think it's good that IRA also has a component for used EVs, because I think that will help. Because frankly, far more people buy used vehicles every year than they buy new. But I think we've got to work together and to make sure as we make this transformation to EV, to do the right thing from a climate perspective, we don't leave anyone behind.
Well said. Ryan?
I've got somebody here, Mary, that would like to be able to speak with you directly.
Hi. First of all, I'm Dr. Geneva, and I work with women in leadership. First of all, I wanted to say congratulations to you and thank you for being such an extraordinary role model. You've probably heard about the conversation on Twitter, about Twitter, that's going on in LinkedIn about the appointment of the new CEO of Twitter. And while it's a wonderful thing, LinkedIn is talking about this phenomena of the glass cliff, where women are put into top leadership positions when things are really difficult or the ship is going down. And I was curious about your view on this phenomena, that is when women and people in underrepresented groups, people of color, have a chance to get a top leadership position, but things kind of are looking like failure, but yet that's when they get that position. I'm curious, how do you perceive the glass cliff phenomena, and in your opinion, what impact does it have on women in leadership positions?
Yeah, I'm not a big subscriber to the glass cliff. I know when I first got this job and then was faced with the ignition switch recall, people said, oh, it was the glass cliff. And I said, if you literally think the company could figure out we've got a crisis coming and then scramble to get a woman to put in the job, come on. So what I think, and I think I've read a lot of articles. I cannot remember the individual's name, the woman who is going to be taking over Twitter. But I think it sells her short, because she wasn't, compelled to take the job. She chose to take the job. So, I think she believes in herself and she believes she can make a difference and she's going to go for it. So I'm like, good. So I think this glass cliff, I think when, regardless if anybody's put into a CEO role in a company that's struggling, and I think, Elon himself will say Twitter is struggling from a financial perspective. I think the individual has to look, are they up for the challenge? Are they going to do that? And I think it's important that people are given a little bit of time and that they get the right support and they have support from their board and they, the freedom to make the changes they need to be successful. If they're constrained, that's a different problem. But I think if she chose to take the job, she believes she can do it, and I'm hopeful that she does. But I think this glass cliff is kind of something that makes an interesting story.
Very interesting. Mary, I don't know if you feel the same way, but sticking on the topic that Geneva brought up, but as a black person, there's often times where I'm the only in the room or one of few in the room, whether it's on a board, a corporate board, or a charitable board, or in a business meeting. And when I'm in that position, I'm taking all y'all with me. So I'm here, I got to represent not only myself or my business, but my folks. And I take that on as a responsibility. But I also have to run a profitable business at the same time. I mean, you are a trailblazer in a lot of ways, and a very, to Geneva's point, a role model, very successful. Do you feel that weight sometimes on behalf of women?
A little bit, but I would say, my mother especially, but my parents, neither of which had the opportunity to go to college. They were older. They both have passed away, but they grew up in the Depression. They were children in the Depression. So, but they had believed in the American dream. And so when I was raised, my mom just said, if you work hard, you can do anything you want to do. So when I first started at General Motors in 1980, and I was the 18-year-old only girl in the room, I didn't see it, because I was like, well, I worked hard, I deserve to be here. So credit to my mom, who just made me think that I have a right to be there. As I got a little older and became more aware of the realities of the corporate world, I did start to notice, and I believe it's, I agree with you, when I'm in the room, if I'm the only woman, or recognizing that I understand what it's like to be considered a minority, I do think there's a voice that you have to have, but I also don't think, I always try to make sure to build allyship, because it can be a lot if you're the only person in the room and you're trying to voice that to help people open their minds and open their eyes, but also, like you said, run a business. And so I think it's okay to help everybody else share that burden with you. Mm-hmm. And so I look at it as okay, if I'm the only woman in the room, let's have a conversation, and it's everybody's job to get the people around this table to be more diverse, mm-hmm. not just mine. And that's the way I look at it. But I think I've learned as I got older that you do have to be that voice, and you do have to be intentional, and you have to make sure that when you only have one or two people, that you make sure they have a chance to be included, and go out of your way to do that. So I think it's something I learned later, mm-hmm. that it was a responsibility of mine, but I think it's a responsibility that you quickly should delegate to everyone around the table.
Right. Ryan?
Yeah, we've got quite a few questions about...
We're going to take two.
Well, no. Well, so quite a few people asked the same question. So I'm going to do this one question, which I think it's on a lot of people's minds, about the partial return to the office. And so this one comes in. Can you comment about the recent experience on the partial return? And then somebody else said, thank you for the leadership of getting people back into the office. How was that accepted, and how has the culture been impacted since people have been away?
Sure. Well, at General Motors, the thing I always tried to remind everybody is in the United States, there's places around the globe that people never stop going into work, but specifically in the U.S., we were down for, I think it was around 6 weeks. But then the men and women came back to our factories, our warehouses, in design, in R&D, the sales force to support all the dealers. They came back. And so, now we sit a couple years later and people are like, oh, it's, so I always sort of first thank the people who did, because if we didn't build cars, we wouldn't have a company. And actually, Mark Royce, our president, and I went around to every plant in this country, our leaders and others, thanking people and making sure they felt safe, but that's what makes the company. So I think first it's helping everybody understand that. But I also would say, as we tried to provide flexibility, because we first said work appropriately, be where you can do your best work. So clearly, if you're working in an assembly plant, you need to be there. But what we found is be where you can do your best work became I want to be wherever I want to be and try to do my work. And that wasn't too productive. And we just noticed, when you look at our business, we integrate vehicles. We design, engineer, manufacture vehicles. A vehicle has about 30,000 parts, and they've all got to be integrated to operate hundreds of millions of lines of code. So we just said to people, look, we've done a great job through a difficult time keeping programs on track, but we know we can do better. And so that's why we need people back at least 3 days a week. I would say overall, it's going well. I think there's a small minority of very vocal people. I try not to go on Reddit too much anymore, but I literally had someone on Reddit. I had someone on Reddit say, I can't come back to work because driving a vehicle is inherently dangerous. And you work at GM? I mean, but I think it's a very small group of people. I think there's some really unhappy people on Reddit that are upset about it. I think they're unhappy about a lot of other things too. I think they're just unhappy in their life. But for the most part, and for us it was interesting because a lot of people that came back had never been to the office because we hired them during COVID. And they were kind of like, do I really have to do this? I had so many people come back and say, I get it. I get why I need to be here. I'm learning how to do my job better. I'm learning more about the business. It's helping us live our culture. You can't take culture for granted. So I would say overall it's been successful, but it's been a journey. And we're not quite, we still have more work to do.
And I've got one more question before I step aside, and I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to talk with you. This person asks, besides the electric vehicle program that GM has, what other clean, renewable energy programs are you working on, either within the offices or within factories?
We're doing a lot from a sustainability. We've set goals for our operations to be carbon neutral, to run on sustainable energy. So we're looking at every part of our business, and then we're also working on additional technologies like hydrogen fuel cells. So we're working across the board. We're working to use less water. So it's a multi-pronged activity that Gerald Johnson, who I mentioned, is responsible for global manufacturing and sustainability. His team is driving a lot of this in our company.
Mary, when we come towards the conclusion of these breakfasts, we often ask or like to leave with some sort of charge, some sort of responsibility. If we were going to go out and evangelize on behalf of General Motors, what would you have us say?
Well, first, I think this is the most exciting time in the auto industry history as we transition. And if you think there's 3 transformations going on right now. One is how the vehicle's propelled, electric. If you haven't driven an electric vehicle, please, they're fun to drive. At least ours are. So fun to drive. The second, though, is the vehicle is really a platform. So you know how we can't live without our phones now. The vehicle we're just at the early stages when we think about Apple CarPlay. We'll think about that as a flip phone, I think, at some point. When you look at what the platform itself as a vehicle can be from a connectivity perspective, I think it's incredible. And the growth opportunities we have as a company as we facilitate the services and subscriptions that we can do. And then the third we talked briefly about is autonomous. 90% of fatalities in the United States are caused by human error. For the handful, I saw a couple hands over there of people who have actually been in an autonomous vehicle. When I ride in one of our cruise vehicles, the ride is so confident because the vehicle knows it's fusing together LiDAR, radar, and cameras to know exactly what's happening around you and to pick the safe path to go forward. It doesn't drive distracted. It's not trying to find its phone. It knows all the laws, and the laws, the speed limits, the school zones. And so it is safer. And so we're moving to this world where we can be in a vehicle that's propelled with 0 emissions and creating an environment where you're going to be more connected and more productive, and then to a world where the vehicle can drive you so you get some time back or still have the opportunity to drive, because I personally love driving, is fun, but you're going to have that choice. So the transformation we're going to see in the next decade is significant in improving lives. And General Motors is really the only OEM that is working on all 3 with, I think, and already has autonomous technology in market. So I couldn't be more excited about what the future holds. And I'm so proud of the men and women of General Motors that make it happen every day.
I would, on behalf of Hiram and Real Times Media and the Michigan Chronicle, on behalf of the folks here this morning who joined us for breakfast, on behalf of the city of Detroit, I want to thank you for your leadership, your vision, your commitment across a number of very important topics to us. And I would just say that, you know, the seat at your company or larger Fortune 100 companies are not filled forever by the same CEO, but we're going to ask that you stick around as long as possible.
I serve at the pleasure of the board. It's not my call.
Thank you. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your week.
Now, here at Motor City, we put the world on wheels, right? But when you think about from a business aspect in the automotive industry as a whole, you know, this future of battery-powered vehicles, it's a thing. The future is here now, and we learned a little bit about that as well today.
Yeah, I mean, I drive a hybrid. I've always wanted, though, one of those electric vehicles. She also taught me something. You know, driver assist is not an autonomous vehicle.
We all learned that today.
And so, you know, it sounded like a shot, but it's reality. And she also had me convinced, because our heads are, well, I would never be in one of those cars that's just driving itself, about how those can be safer.
She talked a lot about inclusion, and that's what you want to do. You want to make sure you have a brand that's inclusive of everyone.